All right, let's jump right into a story about survival, some pretty cool science, and one incredibly tough grain that's up against, well, a kind of hidden enemy.
I mean, that sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? But for farmers all over the planet, this is a very, very real crisis that's only getting worse. So today, we're going to break down some fascinating research that looks for an answer right inside the cells of this tiny but really powerful seed.
Okay, so before we get to the villain of our story, let's introduce the hero. And that hero is pearl millet.
Pearl millet is it's an incredible plant. We're not just talking about food here. This thing is a survivor. It's packed with protein. We're talking like 12.6%, tons of iron, minerals, B vitamins. It's a total nutritional heavyweight. But its real superpower, its toughness. This grain absolutely thrives in hot, dry places where most other crops would just wither and die. For millions and millions of people, this isn't just a grain, it's a lifeline.
And we're not talking about some niche crop here, not at all. In India alone, they produce over 8.6 million tons of it every single year. Just to put that in perspective, that's more than half of the entire world's production. So yeah, keeping this super grain healthy, it's kind of a big deal.
But, even a super grain has its kryptonite. And in this story, the threat isn't some bug or a fungus. Nope, it's something way more subtle. Something that's literally creeping into the ground beneath it. It's called soil salinization. And what that really means is, well, the soil is just getting too salty. This happens for a bunch of reasons. Could be the water used for irrigation, or even seawater seeping into coastal farms. Now, a little bit of salt is okay, but when it starts to build up, it becomes straight up toxic for plants.
Okay, so this slide really gets to the heart of the problem. On the left, you've got your healthy plant. Water flows from the soil into the roots, no problem. Easy. But look at the right. That's what happens in salty soil. All of a sudden, the ground is saltier than the inside of the plant's roots. And the basic physics of osmosis, it just flips. The plant can't pull water in anymore. In fact, the salty soil starts pulling water out of the plant. Scientists have a name for this: physiological drought. The plant is literally surrounded by water, but it's dying of thirst. How crazy is that?
And the scale of this threat, it is just massive. Stresses like high salt in the soil can cut the productivity of major crops by more than 50%. Think about that. That's a catastrophic loss. We're talking about a real threat to food security on a global scale.
Okay, so this is where the science gets really, really cool. A team of researchers in India decided, let's put our hero, the pearl millet, to the ultimate test. They wanted to see exactly how it copes with this salty threat. And, more importantly, if they could give it a helping hand.
So, let's walk through their experiment. First, they took two different types of millet. One that's known to be pretty tough against salt, and another that's, well, a bit more sensitive. Step 2, they watered some plants with regular tap water and others with salty water. Pretty straightforward. Then, and this is the really important part, they sprayed some of those salt-stressed plants with a special cocktail of compounds. These are called plant growth regulators. They wanted to see if this spray could act like a secret weapon. Finally, they just measured everything: the plant's health, its biochemistry, the whole shebang.
All right, so let's get to the results. What did they actually find? This is where we get to peek under the hood and see what's happening inside a plant when it's literally fighting for its life.
First up, the damage you can see with your own eyes. The plants that got the salty water were clearly not happy. On average, their shoots, their main stems, were shorter, about an 8.7% decrease. The salt was literally stunting their growth.
And the damage wasn't just on the outside. Chlorophyll, that's the green pigment that lets plants turn sunlight into energy, it took a huge hit, a drop of over 13%. When you have less chlorophyll, it means the plant's little energy factories are shutting down. It's basically starving.
But this is where our story takes a really interesting turn, because pearl millet doesn't just sit there and take it. When it senses danger, it fires up its own internal defense systems.
So the plant's first line of defense is this amino acid called proline. And just look at these numbers. The salt-stressed plants started churning out 102% more of it. That's more than double. Think of proline as the plant's own internal sports drink. It helps its cells hold on to every last drop of water and keep their shape. It's just an amazing adaptation.
But the salt stress also creates all these nasty, toxic molecules that damage the plant's cells. So the millet deploys an emergency cleanup crew. These are special antioxidant enzymes. And the activity of one of the most important ones, peroxidase, shot up by over 63%. These enzymes are just working overtime, neutralizing the toxins and trying to repair the damage.
So the plant is fighting hard, right? But it's still taking a beating. The question is, could the scientists give it a little extra firepower? This is where that special spray comes back in, a mix of two growth regulators known as NAA and salicylic acid.
And the results were, well, they were pretty remarkable. Just look at this. On the left are the stunted plants that only got salty water. But on the right, those are the plants that got the spray. They started growing taller again. They were actually recovering from the stress. That spray was actively helping them fight off the stunting effects of the salt.
And get this, the spray didn't just act like a medicine. It was more like a super soldier serum. It didn't just fix the problem, it supercharged the plant's own natural defenses. The peroxidase activity, that's the cleanup crew we talked about, was an incredible 90% higher in the sprayed plants than in the ones just dealing with the salt on their own. It was basically helping the millet fight even harder and smarter.
So what does all this talk about cellular chemistry and enzyme activity really mean for the bigger picture? Well, it points to a brand new strategy in our ongoing fight to protect our food supply.
You know, the researchers' own conclusion really says it all. They found that this combination, this synergy, significantly improves physiological and biochemical attributes. What they're saying is that this isn't just a theory. It underscores the practical importance of using these specific regulators to make our crops stronger.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap of the big takeaways. First, soil salinity is a huge and growing problem for agriculture. Second, tough plants like pearl millet have their own built-in defenses, but even they can get overwhelmed. The research also showed that the naturally salt-tolerant variety always did better. And finally, that simple spray of NAA and salicylic acid was the most effective treatment by far, acting like a powerful ally to the struggling plants.
And that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to end on. As our planet gets warmer and saltier, and the pressures on our farms just keep growing, maybe the biggest solutions won't all come from massive, complex projects. Maybe, just maybe, they'll come from clever, simple ways to help the amazing crops we already have become even tougher. Could a simple spray really hold a secret to feeding our future? It's definitely something to think about.